So this we have this map up here, and it comes into play about how Paul ended up in Philippi in the first place, and it's pretty crazy how he ended up there. So this is a map of Paul's first missionary journey, and then John Mark bailed on him and went back to Jerusalem, and that's this black line here that's dotted. So his first missionary journey is they started up here in Antioch. Is this dotted line, the brown dotted line? The second missionary journey is this solid line, and if you can see all the places he went. But do you see Macedonia up there where it says Macedonia? Everybody see that? Okay. If you go to the right of just above the NIA, do you see Amphipolis? Everybody see that? And next to that, you see Philippi. That's Philippi. That's where. So it's in Macedonia. The area is called Macedonia. And you can see Galatia and all these others, and this is all going to come into play. So as I read this to you, I want you to be looking at the map so that you can see how Paul got to Philippi for the first time. So I'm going to start at verse 6 in Acts 16. And it says this. And they went, so they are Paul and his companions on this trip. And who's writing this, by the way? Who's writing Acts? Luke is. And he's going to join halfway through or partway through that second missionary journey of Paul. And we know that because he starts saying we. So he hasn't yet, right? So they went through the region of Phrygia and Galatia, having been forbidden by the Holy Spirit to speak the word in Asia. So you see where Phrygia and Galatia are, right? And then you see that they were forbidden to go into Asia. Now, that's not what we would call Asia, but that's what it was called back then, yes. Yeah, we don't know. All it says is they were forbidden by the Holy Spirit to speak the word in Asia. I don't know. To me, it reads very much like one of Mrs. Schrog's stories about going to Cuba or someplace else, that we were planning to go here, but then God said, go to the woman in the red dress or whatever, and then ends up going someplace else. We don't know the details. But whatever it was, they believed it was Jesus telling them not to. Sometimes Paul does tell us what happened, and we're going to read about what happened to make them go to Philippi, and he does tell us that. So, and when they had come up to Mysia, so everybody see Mysia now? Okay, Mysia should be. Yeah, where it's above that word Asia, okay? So this is all Turkey, by the way. This is now Turkey. And then you go across to Macedonia and Greece there. Anybody play Worldle? What? Yes. Worldle? It's a geography game. And you guess you just get the outline of the and when it's devoid of the context around it, sometimes you're like, no, that's not. I didn't get Greece because I was looking at it from a different way. And when I realized it was Greece, I was like, you idiot. Of course that's Greece. But devoid of the context, it wasn't right. So they when they had come to Mysia, they attempted to go into Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them. So first he wants to go to Asia, and the Spirit says no. And then he wants to go to Mysia and Bithynia, and the Spirit says no. So passing by Mysia, they went down to Troas, which was a port city. And a vision appeared to Paul in the night. A man of Macedonia was standing there, urging him and saying, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." And when Paul had seen the vision, immediately we now, right? So this is where Luke has started. We sought to go on into Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. So that's how he ends up in Macedonia and hence Philippi. Yes. Oh, that one, I believe he started in Jerusalem.
Oh, okay, because I thought he was starting like above, over, like at the top. So I was confused why he.
Yeah, this is his return. So he started in Jerusalem and went up through all of that area and then down through Greece. He ends up in Athens. That's a really great story.
I thought he started at like somewhere at the top and then he went down and then they're like, let's go to Macedonia, and then he was back.
No, no, yeah, they just kind of kept going west in what is now Turkey. So, what were the circumstances that originally brought Paul to Philippi? What? No, the shipwreck was, we just read it. That's his third mission. Maybe, I don't know about this one. Okay, but before that, what happened? Yeah, in a way that we aren't told, he was forbidden by God, by the Spirit of Jesus, from going into the places he had planned. He had planned to go into Asia, and he couldn't. And then he thought, well, okay, we'll go on to Mysia, and he couldn't. So in some way, God told him not to go. And we don't know exactly why. But then when they went to Troas, they're at the, in the port area, and Paul has this vision of a man from Macedonia. I don't know how he knew he was Macedonian, but he knew he was Macedonian. He said, come and help us. Come preach the gospel to us. I don't know if that was an angel. I don't know. All these things will be, as C.S. Lewis says, the first thing we're going to say is, of course. We'll know all of those things when we get there. So he was forbidden to go the places he had planned, but then Jesus, they brought a vision that took him to Philippi. This is interesting to me because we tend to make plans, right? About, okay, so today I'm going to do this and this and this, and I'm going to, and I do that all the time. Like I wake up in the morning, and my first thoughts usually are, okay, so today I need to make sure I get this done, and then I got the basketball game, and I got to go home and clean the house because Shelly's staying with me, and I have this sort of running thing about what's happening today, and sometimes I wake up and go, what's happening, and it takes me a while, and oftentimes it doesn't go the way I planned, right? But it goes exactly the way God planned. When I was in college, I think it was 1981, possibly 82. My sister was married, so it would have been 80. It would have been 81 or 82. My parents, mostly my father's secretary, planned this huge vacation for our family. My dad had been told by the CEO. He said, "You are taking a vacation," because he hadn't taken one in the 3 years or so that he had worked there, and 3 or 4 years. And so this whole, like, I don't know, like caravan through the western part of the United States was hatched. And my dad bought a van. He bought a van that was like a cargo van. And then he took it to one of those places that tricks out cards and stuff and turned it into a conversion van, a really nice conversion van, for us to take this trip. And we started out in Omaha, of course, and then we went across Nebraska into the Sandhills. This was the plan anyway. Into the Sandhills, across Wyoming. I loved Wyoming. and then Montana, and we saw friends all along the way. When you're an Air Force family, when you're a military family, you got friends everywhere. And then we went to northern Colorado, not Colorado. We went to northern California, went all the way down to San Diego, went through I don't know which is first, Mexico and Arizona, up through Colorado to western Nebraska, Dodge City to pick up my grandmother, and then came home through Kansas. That was the plan. But things don't usually go. So we're driving, and my dad's driving, and he gets tired. He'd been up late the night before, and so we're in western Nebraska, and he asks me to drive. And so I'm driving, and I noticed that the oil gauge is a little bit low, but I didn't think anything of it. And my dad was sleeping in the back, and he needed to sleep, so I didn't want to wake him. And it didn't really, register with me that there was a problem until we were between Bassett and Ainsworth, Nebraska, out in the middle of nowhere. And we're on a 2-lane highway, and the van goes clunk, clunk, stop. And my dad said, "What happened?" And I said, "Daddy, I think we're out of oil," which kills, literally kills an engine. In the moment, he was not happy with me. And he very kindly, but very obviously expressed his displeasure. In fact, he made me walk with him to the nearest farmhouse. And the farmer took us in, and we got a tow truck, and they towed us back. And we stayed in the one hotel in Bassett, Nebraska. And we they told us, "Well, you're not going on your vacation because you need an entirely new engine, and we can't do that here." And so we had to drive back to Nebraska. They did what they could, pouring oil into the engine every 70 miles, I think, a quart of oil every 70 miles. And then he had to pay a whole lot of money for this van that he'd already paid a whole lot of money for us to be able to go. And a week later, we started out on vacation, and we were able to get through the whole thing. Here's the thing. As a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, I don't think I really could grasp like how much that disrupted my father's life, my family, my everything. That was not our plan. But oftentimes we make our plans. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I say it every morning, right? But as I told you, but the day doesn't always go as I planned. It almost never goes as I planned. And that's true here too with Paul. And his desire was to do what God had for him. And that needs to be true of all of us, not just I'm going to make my plans and hope God blesses them. No, I'm going to follow God's plans because I know He'll bless them. So that's how Paul got to Philippi. So now we're just going to talk about, we're not going to read anything more. We're just going to talk about some of the themes of Philippians in general. So joy is a primary theme in Philippians. How would you define joy? Yes.
Like contentment, like it's not.
Okay, so it's a contentment, being satisfied with where you are or what you have. It's not. So how does it differ from happiness? What?
Happiness is temporary.
Happiness is temporary. What were you going to say, Irene?
Yeah, it's more long.
It's more what?
Long lasting.
Joy is more long lasting. I would say that happiness is generally dependent on our circumstances. Right? When we win this game tonight, when you won your game last night, you were happy, right? Because you won. We'll be happy when we win. I know I say that all the time. But they're not part of you. They're not. They're not Elmo. They're more like Brown and Talbot, and I think we know. I think joy is this settled peace and equanimity. You can look that word up if you don't know it. That is not dependent on circumstances. It is a state of being, not an emotion that comes and goes. And happiness, I think, is more dependent on our circumstances. We're happy when something good happens, but then we're sad when something sad happens. I think we can have joy even amidst the sadness. My mother certainly did. She was the most insanely positive person I've ever met. But I was at camp when this happened because I had no idea. None of us had any idea how quickly it would go. And shortly before, she was in pain. My mother was in pain, and so she asked for the patch that would put her out and she would wake up again. But just before that, when she was in pain, my sister got her all showered and dressed in her nice little house coat. And she's sitting in her wheelchair and she says, "Okay, Jesus, I'm ready." And that got into a conversation with my sister. And, uh, and my sister was upset. And she looked at my sister and said, "Sweetie, I'm not afraid to die." And my sister said, "I know you're not. I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about me." And she had joy. She had joy. She was the most joyful human being I ever met. Uh, when a tornado hit our house and water was pouring down from my sister's bedroom into the living room, she was getting buckets, and she's in there with the buckets going, "I'm singing in the rain." Our house had been split open, and she's just, she had joy. She was a joyful human being, and that comes from God. Number 3, the unity of the church is another primary theme of Philippians. Why is unity among believers important? Yes. Yeah, yeah. The world is watching. Unbelievers are watching, and I heard someone say once that the most damaging thing to Christianity is when they see us, fighting and biting and devouring one another, as Paul puts it. Um, they go, "Well, Christianity thing isn't true. Look at how they're behaving." And what?
Horrible, I know.
Well, we all are, and they are too. They just are judging us on our dirty, rotten sins as well. Um, so yeah, it's important for us to be unified with one another to help us grow, but also the world is watching. Listen, I'll tell you right now that this high school faculty, we love one another. We really love one another, and we get along so well. I mean, most of our meetings are mostly laughing, not at you.
Yeah,
But this would be the culture of at least of our teachers would be fundamentally different. And there have been times when it was different. But now we get along so well. We are for each other. If I first the first day we were back for teacher meetings this year, I the night before started having flashes out the right side of my eye, and I looked it up, and it was a possibility that I had a retinal tear. And it said, "Don't lift anything," and don't. Well, my classroom was all jumbled, and I needed everything put into place. And I just put out a text: "Can somebody come help me put my room together?" Nora, Mrs. Wagner, Mrs. Peltier, they all came, and like 30 seconds later, it was all set. And I just sat there watching. We are for one another, and I hope you guys see that. I hope you guys realize that. And that's what the world looks at. That we're that way, or or we're not that way. Are there any situations where it becomes necessary to break unity with other believers? And if so, what would be an example? Yes.
Remember where it is, but there's somewhere in the Bible where it's you have a problem, like in your church, like person first, they don't listen with a friend, listen, like bring it before church elders or pastor or something, and then like the last thing is like, all right, then.
Right. So not only did Jesus talk about that, but Paul talks about that as well. It's called church discipline. And if somebody does something that they're not supposed to do, you're first supposed to go, like if someone has hurt you, you go and ask the person to, uh, you know, to admit to that. And if he refuses or she refuses, then you go back and you get an elder. And if he still refuses, then you go back and bring more elders. And if he still refuses, then you kick him out of the church. That's church discipline. It's not utilized often these days. Some churches still do. But there are times that someone is so toxic or so uh, dangerous for your faith that you have to break ties with that person. Now, I can't say that I've had that happen in my life, but I think I've seen it in others' lives at times. Number 4, Paul discusses at length in Philippians the problem of suffering in the Christian life. Does suffering have a purpose? And if so, what might that purpose or those purposes? Yes.
I would say suffering does have a purpose, and says therefore, and God even said, we're not going to live.
Yeah, none of us is exempt from that, right? Yes.
This is like kind of along the lines of just like the suffering question. You know how like in Job, Satan was like testing Job, saying, "I can make him like fall away from
Turn
you." I
away
guess.
from
Yeah.
that,
Do you think like Satan and God like they still have those things today with like certain people? Or?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think Satan can't do anything that God doesn't allow. So if he is Father, the Son, whatever he's allowing that, I suppose, in some way. But I think it is probably an extreme situation. C.S. Lewis says that God whispers to us um, in our joy, and he screams at us in our pain. Not screams like angry screams, but he speaks up. He comes to us more clearly, more thoroughly in our pain. And I do think that suffering can and does have purpose. I've seen it happen too many times that I can't ignore it. My dad was pretty deep into his Alzheimer's when he asked one night when their small group was meeting, and he didn't talk a lot at that point. He asked if he could pray. They said, of course. And my father's prayer was this: God, thank you for giving me this disease, because without it, I might not know how much my family loves me. And it can't. Suffering can have purposes. I think we've had a very recent example. I don't know why Levi was born with 3 holes in his heart. I know it wasn't God's condemnation on him. what I do know is that that 10-year-old boy in his lifetime influenced more people for Jesus Christ than I ever. Hundreds of police officers, firefighters, anyone at that funeral touched, even if they didn't know him, the funeral itself was screaming that Jesus loved you. And I've told you about Chad, my mother's best friend, told her life had an adult son with Down syndrome. And the last lines of the poem I wrote for him are the world may see a paradox and some refuse to see, but I have learned much more from Chad than he'll ever. And there are situations that are unbelievably hard, and yet God brings blessing through those hard times. And only He can. That's something only He can do. And then the last question is just, do you have any questions about the study? So like we've done with the In Search and other times you've interacted with my Bible studies, you'll answer questions about a portion of Philippians, and then I'll lecture on it. And this is a really good way to study the Bible. Find a Bible study at your church or that someone's teaching, and learn about the Bible and about through those studies. Questions? Okay, that's it for today.